My name is Ernie Ector. I'm co-chair with Jamie Inman. Really the purpose of today's meeting is to start to put structure around the search process. As you know, we selected Buffkin Baker as our search firm consultant, and most of the agendas you'll see is their description of how the process can and should work, what they need from us, and then from those discussions we can start setting calendars and speak to specific subject information that they need to begin and put in place the next steps in the process. Before we dig into all of that, we thought it'd be a good idea for those of us who've not met each other in person in some cases, and certainly for the Buffkin Baker team to have a round of introductions, and then based on that, we can proceed with the substance of today's agenda. So I think what we'll do, perhaps easiest, is start here around the table, and then we can have the folks who are online introduce themselves, and so that we can do a good segue. Ken, I'll start with you, and then we'll go around the table this way, and then after I introduce myself, we can go to the folks on the phone.
Thank you, Ernie. Thanks for having us here. Appreciate being able to visit Post and get to meet all of you guys in person, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ken Carrick. I'm a partner of Buffkin Baker. Briefly, first-gen college student from Small County, North Carolina. I chose my college based on where I could play sports. I was a football player at Utah College. Talent education, went on and got a master's degree from Wake Forest. And I am almost 40 years into my search career. About 25 years ago, myself and Jenny DeLoach, who you'll meet in a moment, started a higher ed practice at our previous firm. 4.5 years ago, Buffkin Baker and Martin recruited us to join their higher ed practice. When we joined, we were numbers 4 and 5 in practice that now has 12. And so just kind of as an aside, so some of you spend a lot of time in Lexington. I have twins that are 31, the boy side of my twins played football at WNL. So I've spent a lot of time in Lexington on the weekends. So appreciate being here in the Florida Park.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jamie Inman. I'm EMI class 86, 27-year Army veteran. Have a great good fortune to come back here and be with this student staff for 80 years. And for the past almost 4 years, I'm working in this field.
Jeremy Knight, class 78. I'm in first NROTC class that graduated BMI and spent 31 years with me and had a great time.
I'm Pat O'Leary. I'm class of 1990. I'm a senior assistant attorney general of BMI County.
Good afternoon, Damon Williams, I'm class of 90. FX, part of a lot of my career here at BMI, and also now I'm doing development officer for major bank, for citizens and one of the
I'm Abby Fargo. I'm in my 12th year here at BMI. I'm a French professor and also the head of modern languages.
I'm Carl Strauss, class of 70 at BMI. I was 36-year plus Army veteran, and I spent about 8 years in the private sector with the Bechtel Corporation. I'm now retired and living on a farm down in Essex County. Back on the Lake Hollywood family. He's treated a lot better than we did. I served the term on board of visitors, and I'm also been to the Vietnam Foundation. Hello, everybody. I'm Lloyd Tolliver. I graduated in 1995 from VMI. I'm an engineering student here. I went off and did my 4-year ROTC commitment with the Navy. Then I went back to grad school, was a banker for a while, and then bought into a maritime tug and barge company headquartered in Norfolk. And then I recently retired from that. As far as BMI involvement, I've been on the foundation. I'm on the LLC committee, so we do the management of the actual endowment itself, and I'm the president-elect of the foundation.
I'm Laura Chambers. I'm class of 03. I'm in land development. I started land company after I graduated. I live in Richmond. I've been on the board of visitors around 2016. I think I got on for 8 years, and now I'm on the foundation.
Well, my name is Ernie Edgar, co-chair of the committee, my 3rd year on the board of visitors. Class of 87, civil engineering graduate, like General Stock, Michigan Corps of Engineers. to activating some reserve time, and attorney based in Tampa, Florida. So now we go to folks on the phone. Kate, since you're the biggest picture, we'll start with you.
Kate Todd, and I hold one of the roles on the board as a non-alum, but a resident of Virginia, and I'm a lawyer by training and profession.
Annie?
I'm sorry, who do they call?
You're up.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought. No one couldn't hear. Sorry. Hi, I'm Janie Deloach. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. I'm a North Carolina native. I have an undergraduate and master's in education from Converse College, where I later worked in admissions and then served as assistant dean of students. I also worked in student affairs at Georgia Tech. So I love being on a campus or post, as you call it, working with young people. About 25, 26 years ago, I got into the search business where Ken and I have worked together since, and then had the very fortunate opportunity to join Buffkin Baker about 5 years ago. And I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Glad to have you. Bill, you're up next.
So my name is Bill Janis. I'm a 1984 graduate of VMI, served in the Navy in submarines and destroyers for 11 years. I'm a graduate of the University of Virginia School of Law and practiced law in the Commonwealth of Virginia for about 30 years. I was appointed in 2024 by Governor Youngkin as one of the out-of-state alumni appointees, and I make my home in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Thanks, Bill. Jamal?
Rob Virginia Mill, Jamal Walton, current VMI Athletics Director, class of 2007. I've been working in college athletics for over 15 years. So again, excited to be a part of the committee.
Great, thanks very much. Martin?
Thank you, and good afternoon to all of you. Martin Baker with the search firm Buffkin Baker. Of course, work alongside Ken and Janie. I'm in my 26th year in the executive recruitment profession, and that translates to almost 400 searches that I've conducted for various universities and colleges across the country. And along with my partner, Craig Buffkin, also one of two principal owners of our firm. Altogether, we're a team of 52 with 7 practice areas. And of course, Ken, Janie, and I work in our higher ed practice. So looking forward to working with all of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Jim Juster's on the other side of the world. Jim, can you hear us okay? I'd say he's able to listen, but not transmit. Jim's in Korea this week, so that's why he's.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Go ahead. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, Jim Justra, class 76, retired Army, retired healthcare executive, live in Florida. And aside from that, worked with the as volunteer with alumni agencies for about 25 years.
Wonderful, thanks. And Will?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Will Collier, VMI class of 2006. I spent 12 years in the Army as a logistics and acquisition officer. I've spent the past 8 years doing logistics and contract management for various companies. I was asked to join the committee. I currently am the vice president of the Alumni Association, and my family and I live in Stafford, Virginia. So I look forward to working with you.
Wonderful, thanks very much. Is there anybody on the phone that we haven't heard from yet?
I think that's everybody.
And for everyone's benefit, we've got Andrew Deal listening in from Kid Club. Andrew, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Andrew Deal, do my class of 2012, former baseball player here at VMI, and the chief operating officer of the Kid Club and the chief development officer for the alumni agency.
Wonderful, thanks very much. So that's everybody around the table, physically and virtually. Thank you all again for being a part of the committee and our committee's important work. At this point in the the agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Ken and his team to talk about the search and go through the different points you want to raise.
All right, thank you. One of the things you'll find about us is we're very informal. So if we say something that pops a question in your mind, do not hesitate to interrupt us to ask the question, but we want to make sure we address what's on your mind. As a team, what we'd like to do is just really start out with some pretty high level comments. I think you guys have already had one meeting where you may have discussed some of this. I know you probably talked about the confidentiality because we talked about the NDAs. One thing that I want to emphasize is we're here to partner with you. We do not replace you. We're here to be your partner to help you accomplish the objectives that you want to accomplish for the institution. So a lot of that in partnership includes us taking some of the what I'll call the grunt work, the really hard, nitty-gritty work off of you guys, but then trying to give you good choices when it comes to selecting a leader so that you have a very difficult choice. In order to do that, when we come together as a group to discuss candidates, everybody's got to feel very confident that they can express their opinions. And you have to be really honest and forthright with each other because you're going to have differences of opinion, obviously. And I always try to remind myself when we are discussing candidates, we're really not critiquing the people. We're critiquing their ability to fit in and do the position. We have to be able to do that openly and honestly with each other, knowing that what we discuss in this room stays in this room. Because only one person's going to get this job, and it may or may not be everybody's first choice. Because there can be legitimate disagreements. Martin and Janie, do you have anything you want to add to that, just in terms of big picture comments?
No, I don't have anything else to add, Ken, but yeah, confidentiality is going to be a very important part of our work and ultimately the success of the search.
Thank you for that. So what I'd like to delve into now is a little bit about how the process, generally we would recommend the process work. We are open to tailoring this to fit your needs. And we're going to start talking about the first step in this process as one of the other agenda items. But what we generally do, I'm going to boil down to 4 basic bullets. And I'll be glad to go into as much detail as you guys want to go into. But the first one is understanding exactly what you guys want in a leader. If we don't understand as much as we can about what you're thinking in terms of all aspects around the superintendent's position, and as much as we can understand about VMI as an institution, it's hard for us to be successful in helping support and find the right leader. So how do we do that? Partly it starts today, partly well, actually it really started with some of our conversations with Jamie and Ernie and Bill. Today is another step. But then we want to talk about a site visit. How do we come on post and meet with the various stakeholder groups and ask a lot of questions and do a lot of active listening? In addition to that, we recommend that you use a survey. I've already sent Ernie, Jamie, and Bill a link where we've kind of drafted a survey that can go out to stakeholders. And in an ideal world, that survey goes out before our site visit. It's very similar to the types of questions we will be asking the groups that we meet with on campus on posts. And from all of that information gathering, it helps us do a couple of things. One is it helps us draft a position profile that will become the written outward facing document that we will use in our solicitation candidates. So that's one thing it helps us do. Now, for that profile, we draft it, we send it back, you got to revise it and improve it. It's your profile, not ours. But we're gonna give you something that's a really, really good starting point. So hopefully your revisions will be fairly minor and minimal. The second thing that being able to listen to stakeholders helps us do is get an understanding beyond what can be put on paper of the type of leader it's going to take to be successful here. And then the third thing it helps us do is craft our story. So much of what we do, and Laura and I were talking about this earlier, we're going to be proactively reaching out to people, which is the next step. We're going to try to go after people for referrals or interest that probably don't know they're interested in this job. About 85 to 90% of the people we end up recruiting are people that we proactively reach out to, either because we've gotten a referral or we've identified them as potential or someone passed along their name to us. And the more we can learn from the stakeholders, the more it helps us synthesize the story that we're going to tell as we begin to engage with these people. We will be, if it's,
So when you go out to that search, so we're a military institution. So do you focus, you say, well, we're not gonna, we want an academic person, a military person, or a business person? How would you?
so, one of the mantras that we use a lot is think broadly, interview broadly, hire as narrowly as you choose, right? Why artificially limiting the options? But a lot of how we plan the search strategy is based on what we hear from you and from the stakeholders. And so we can be as focused and as narrow as you tell us to be. We may ask you questions and push back and say, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? I think clearly the military background, and I actually read in the previous profile where that was a requirement. I think you see all kinds of non-traditional candidates ascending to the presidency, and non-traditional may mean somebody coming from outside of an academic environment, or it may be somebody inside an academic environment who has a different type of background, whether it's fundraising, financial, enrollment, whatever. You guys want to add to that in terms of how we focus the strategy, where we look?
I would say.
Ken, you covered it.
I would say Ernie's the one that spoke this earlier. In general, we do want it to be as broad as it can be, but if you were to break down historically, there's really three different kind of models, right? You got the career soldier, normally in the long who attains flag or general officer rank, and then comes back. You have an individual that serves in the military for a number of years, goes into higher education, does a number of years in higher education, and then comes in as a superintendent. And then the third, which is not as often, but it has happened in our history, in our past history, you have mostly alums who do military service, go into the private sector, very successful on that income. So we shared that with everyone, just as a starting point, but it can be as broad as we want. Does that wrap that up?
Absolutely.
And that's really going to come into play when I talk about the second step. But to last comment on the first step, we're the first line of verbal representation of this opportunity to the candidates engaging us. So we want to make sure we have a compelling story, and that everything that we say on your behalf is consistent with what they're going to find when they end up having first time interviews with this committee or business supposed. From that profile, now that we know what we're looking for, then we go into sourcing, and there are two types of sourcing, generally speaking. One is the passive. It'll be, I assume the position profile will be on your superintendent search website. It'll be on our LinkedIn page. It'll be on our website. We'll do appropriate postings. The reason I call that passive is it is dependent upon who reads it and who responds. Where we really try to spend most of our time is the proactive, identifying people in certain groups, whether it's business, military, BMI, alums, et cetera. And then we are proactively contacting those individuals. And essentially, we want to know two things. Are you interested? If not, who do you know? Every single person that we have contact with is a potential source of referrals, or in some instances, potentially a candidate. There are some people we will contact that we know they're not a candidate, but they may know somebody. And there are lots of ways they can respond to us, particularly when we reach out via email. One's just ignore it, delete it, one's to respond and basically say, I don't have anything. One that we don't know about, but we hope happens, is they get forward and send it to 5 or 10 of their colleagues. Because now we've turned maybe 1,000 contacts into 2,500 to 5,000. Because what we want to do is make sure as many people as possible are exposed to the opportunity, so we have the best chance to engage with a broad and diverse group of individuals that may be qualified. So we have to get the word out. And that's the proactive thing. And once we start that sourcing, and I'll let Janie tag in, because the backside of that sourcing begins our evaluation, which moves us into the third phase, which is helping you evaluate or trying to evaluate a group of candidates that we can then present to you. You want to talk about, one of you guys want to talk about that?
Sure. Once we've established who we're going after and we've proactively sent that email to hundreds of people who either might have an interest or know of someone, then we make phone calls. And when we say that, we use every venue out there, because I'm of the belief that it might take multiple times for someone to see the opportunity before they go, you know, maybe I should think about this. It keeps popping up. Maybe there's a reason. But then I will talk to anyone who is interested, as will all of us, but that dedicated email will come to my desk. And so I will see anyone that reaches out for more information, for a conversation, and I will give them a call, learn a little bit more about them, take them through a historic interview. I would love to start with where they grew up, what was their background, why are they interested, will they relocate, what their compensation expectations are, and basically do a very initial, very in-depth background through how they got to where they are today, what their story is. Once we've established that, I will share that information with Martin and Ken, and they can talk about this. They'll take it a little bit further.
So that moves us into the third phase, which is the initial evaluation. So one of the things that might, I'll state explicitly, that might be implicit in that first step, you guys are actively involved because we have to hear from you. We're on site visit. Once we move into the sourcing phase, other than maybe passing along names of people you want us to look at, that's where we shoulder a lot of burden to do our sourcing. When we move into the third phase, which is evaluation, that's where we take the first half of that, and Danny described a part of it. You guys will then become a lot more active and become the primary players on the second part. But in addition to what Danny mentioned, once she has somebody that she thinks may be a good fit and has some legitimate interest, then she turns it over to Martin and I, and one of us will interview them in person. And what we try to do, and I'm going to date myself, I think I use this with you guys. I call it the Paul Harvey Friday afternoon rest of the story. I want to know what I can't read. I want to know about that person, their motives, their experiences, why they've done certain things, and try to get some assessment of fit. One of the main things that Martin and I do when we do those personal interviews is to try to assess, does this person have everything or most of everything that the institution is looking for, and will they be a good fit as a leader in the superintendent position? There is no perfect candidate. I've been doing this almost 40 years and haven't seen a perfect candidate yet. But we will know enough about those individuals so that when we come back to present those candidates, we can tell you what our concerns are. So that where the onus shifts to you guys is when we come in to present those candidates. We will set up a meeting with you guys as a committee. We will have shared the information through a confidential portal so you can read the written material ahead of time. And then we will come in and sit down with you and we will walk you through each candidate. And let you know some of the rest of the story, things that you may not be able to pick up just from reading their material. And then we're here to answer questions. It's our goal to give you as much information as possible about the people that we recommend so that you can make the most informed decision possible about who you want to interview. We also have mechanisms that we can use to help you go through an efficient and thorough discussion to try to narrow that group down. And that's really where we back over to the advisor role, and you guys are the decision makers. And then we're here to support you and partner with you to get through an efficient, thorough, effective process to make the best decision possible. And that can be everything from talking about going through that process of how do you narrow it down to who you want to talk to? What does that first interview look like? What are some best practices? What types of topics may you want to cover? To helping plan visits to post, etc. We have opinions from our experience based on that whole process. We will share them with you. But you may choose to do something different. And as long as you don't ask us to do anything illegal, immoral, or unethical, which is kind of what you were talking about in a leader, we will help you do what you want to do. This is your process. All right, guys, you want to chip in on anything I missed there?
Ken, I'll jump in because this also, I think, reflects a previous question as you're talking about the time we spend with candidates, it really is about institutional alignment. And that's something that we are very mindful of, but that also starts with these early conversations. And some, if not all of you know, we conducted the presidential search at Christopher Newport that led to the appointment of Bill Kelly. And that was really important as we went through that process, was being mindful of really the investments Christopher Newport had made around service and character and leadership. And as probably all of you know, at the time, Bill Kelly was serving as the superintendent of the Coast Guard Academy. And so I think that's really important to maybe provide an example of what Ken is talking about in terms of the time spent with you all and all of the constituent groups and how that translates through the process as we would ultimately get to the point of presenting candidates.
I have contended for a number of years, if we don't do that up front, it's harder for us to get a good group of candidates really because we don't understand exactly what they're looking for. So we do try to invest the time. We want to be very hands-on as your advisor. And again, we feel like we have a fiduciary responsibility to give you our best opinion. So then the fourth phase, which is really the wrap up, after you go through your evaluation and you've decided on who your finalists are going to be and who you want to make an offer to, we want to make sure that we got all the I's and cross all the T's. Background check, reference checks will help you negotiate an offer and acceptance if that's what you would like. We want to help you complete the transaction that results from this relationship that we've built with you. One thing, and I think it's implicit in what we've described, I want to make sure to say this, we work for you. Everything we do, we represent VMI. It is not our job to help candidates find a job. Our job is to help you find a leader for the superintendent position. So our whole orientation is to help you as the committee, as the representative of VMI. Now, we, as Mark mentioned, we spend a lot of time with candidates. We have to treat them professionally. We're very honest with them. We try to present as best as we can, true picture of where everything is. But in the end, they know we work for you guys. So we've just described a pretty complicated process fairly quickly. It can have lots of twists and turns, it takes some planning and some logistics. It really all starts with, in terms of the nitty gritty, that site visit and listening to the stakeholders. So I'm gonna be quiet and see if you guys have any questions generally about process.
I've got one. When you're screening folks at the very beginning, there are going to be a number that you recommend you bring forward, and then there's going to be a number that you're going to recommend or that are not. It's then those that are screened out. If a committee member wanted to look at the names, whatever, wanted to know what the background is that possible?
Yes, it is. The one caveat is if it's someone we're trying to recruit and they're really not in it, and we never get them to say no, then they have an expectation of confidentiality. But if it's somebody that engaged with us, sent us a resume, and we said we don't think they're as qualified, absolutely. Absolutely.
So using the Christopher Newport as an example, how long did that process take and how does that compare to the timeline?
I'll defer that to Mark.
Yeah, so that process was about a 6 to 7 month process. So a little bit lengthier in time. But I think we've also got a very realistic timeline that we've been discussing for this search as well. Sometimes they're just lengthier for various reasons, scheduling, when you start the search on the calendar, they're variables, but yeah, that was about a 6 to 7 month process.
On that individual, I mean, so my guess, he probably didn't know about Christopher Newport.
Yeah, he was nominated. And so he was someone that we had several conversations with about this opportunity. He had spent time earlier in his career in Newport News, so he was familiar with Christopher Newport, but I will tell you, it was a very different institution when he was in Newport News than what it is today. So he had a lot more to learn as he was exploring the opportunity. And we talk about institutional alignment, it goes both ways. I mean, he was certainly in a discovery phase as well. But yeah, it was not on his radar at the time.
And to Martin's comment about it, needs to go both ways. Janie refers to this as matchmaking. We can't have win-loses. We have to have win-wins for it to be successful in the long run. And that's our goal, is to get that institutional alignment with the candidates. And hopefully, if we do our job correctly, you have a tough choice. We want your job to be easy on the front end, but we take a lot of that grunt work off of you, but we really want it to be tough.
And we talked a little bit about the identifying candidates and winnowing it down to series of pools and the questions that are asked. I believe I'm correct in saying last time we went through the search process, there was an offsite, I call it the semifinal round, where we had maybe 8 semifinalists, and that condensed down to 4 finalists who then came on post. And so the question that I have is more of the process bit. When do we formulate the questions to ask of the semifinalists? And then I presume that's this committee posing those questions as we go through those rounds, whether it's in person or virtual, how we choose to do it. But then the final round where the finalists come on to post, how do we envision that work? Or is that something that we will have to flesh out as we go deeper into this process?
I think it's not mandatory that you flush it out now. I think you've got time to do that. And that is something that the wisdom of the committee will weigh in on. We have some ideas about how we think that could go, and we will share those with you. But I think you've got time for that. I think the more important, the need that'll come up the most is to determine how you're going to handle that first round. It is our opinion that doing them in person is absolutely the best if you can do them instead. And it is also our opinion if you do them off-site. You go somewhere, and typically, depending on where the candidates are coming from, you can go to an airport, hotel, et cetera, someplace where it's easy to get people in and out of, including yourselves. And you can usually knock those out over a 24-hour period. We generally recommend that if you do them, one afternoon, get a little break, then have them the next morning, and have some debrief time at the end. Normally, that debrief time at the end, when you decide who's going to be invited to post, is when you can start planning, if you haven't already, start planning what that post visit will look like. One of the things that is probably not too early to start thinking about, given the time frame you're under, is in an ideal world, when would those visits to post be? Now, it's always good if you have people on post when there's activity. Summer's usually not the highest activity, and given that you're anticipating an August starting, I think that's one of the things you mentioned in our meeting, you'll have to kind of give that up. But to at least start thinking about when those visits might take place, and I would anticipate 3 to 4 visits as a general rule. 3 to 4 people visiting, so typically you're trying not to have them run into each other, so it's typically some combination of those days. There are ways to stagger those. Back to the first round of interviews, if you can do those in person, I think it's you can go ahead after we get the profile and really start thinking about what types of questions, but some of the questions may be directed a little differently for different candidates based on the backgrounds they bring to the table. We're a big fan of what I call dinner table interviews. I don't think you get as much information in really structured check the box interviews. We believe the things that people will talk about the most are themselves, their family, and their job, because that's what they know the best. And you want to ask open-ended questions and get them talking about themselves, but they'll tell you a lot of things that you won't even have to ask them. And I think if you think about the things you want to ask about, which will lead to some specific questions around those things, like leadership, financial acumen, those type of things, it won't be hard to come up with a list of conversation topics to engage someone. Incidentally, for those of you that haven't heard us say this in our previous meetings, we like to participate in those interviews. One, we can handle all the logistics, so all you have to do is focus on talking to the individuals. Secondly, if we sit in as an advisor, at that point, we're the person, generally speaking, that knows the candidates the best, so we can see, are they telling us something different? Is there something that's not coming out that we think should come out? We can look at the interaction from a distance and say, how are they clicking with the committee, et cetera. There's some value we can add if you let us participate, and particularly if you do them in person. But those are all decisions this committee will make. And typically, when we would have our most robust discussion about that is in that meeting where we present candidates. That meeting generally has three parts. We present candidates, we go through a format that walks through the discussion, say who we want to move to that round. And then the third part is when does that round take place and what does it look like?
Thank you.
Is that may be more than you wanted to hear, because I've touched on several topics, but.
No, but that flushes it out a lot, so I appreciate that.
Yes.
You mentioned coming up with a position profile after doing the initial survey and site visit with the stakeholders. But I was curious, maybe this is more for Jamie or Ernie, if there are just upfront qualifications that we're looking for, that they're set by any of our accrediting bodies or normal best practices of university presidents. You know, it's like when we hire for academics and faculty, we have minimum qualifications, and so do we have a list of those already?
I'm not sure that we, first of all, we can look into it for sure. I think probably what we definitely have is the last one that we used, and probably the one before that. I would ask, do you think that there's any, from a code standpoint? I mean, we can take a look at it.
Yeah, it's one of like more accredited ones, you know, it's like for to be accredited with professors, they have to pass certain.
Can you answer that? I don't think it's any requirement code, I can check that.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Bill.
my understanding is the Code of Virginia speaks to residency as a requirement for board members, but I thought that same code section also talks about presidents and superintendents. I may be mistaken because I haven't looked at it in a while, but that would be something we'd want to know sooner rather than later.
I recommend we ask Pat O'Leary to get the answer to that pretty quickly. Can you do that for us, Pat?
Great.
And then I've asked Bill to ask Colonel Luna, who's the, what do we call him now?
Institutional activities.
He's also the SAC COC liaison, so from an accreditation standpoint, we can make sure that we're aware of if there's anything from an accreditation standpoint. And then in the near term, we'll have the last one, if not two.
If I may ask, I would think that the topic in that regard that comes up the most is term limit. That's the thing that we normally run into, but my experience has been that was more institution based than say body.
It's not a Virginia requirement.
I didn't get to it.
Bill, are you saying that there has to be a state resident to be qualification?
No, what I'm saying is the last time I looked at the code, I was looking at it, the section that talks about members of the Board of Visitors. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I thought, my recollection may be wrong, but I thought it also spoke to presidents and superintendents. Now, the presidents they may be talking about are presidents of the Board of Visitors. So that's why I think it's a knowable fact. I'm sure Pat can find it pretty quickly in the Code of Virginia, and then we'll know so that we don't get too far down the process and then get surprised by some requirement in the code that we weren't aware of.
This is a bit tangential to that topic, but just to, again, to make sure you guys know where we're coming from. Whenever someone chooses to engage with us, there are three things right up front we want to know. Why are you interested? We want to explore the method. We don't really want to assume based on what we read, we want to probe. The second thing is we want to know about relocation. Are there any potential obstacles, concerns, et cetera? It's our experience that if we address that on the first conversation, you minimize the chance for surprises later on. Because sometimes it's easy for people to say, yes, I'd be interested in that without thinking through the ramifications or talking to their spouse or partner or family. We want to stimulate those conversations right from the beginning. And then the third thing we want to know is what are your top expectations? If you end up being the chosen candidate, what are your expectations going to be? Because if they're out of line and they're way out of line, then it doesn't matter how good they are, they're not recruiting them, same as relocation. If they're a little bit out of line, then maybe we can start managing those expectations right up front so that if they are the right candidate, we don't end up with a surprise at the end. And we are dealing with people, people change their mind, and some people think, well, they're likely well enough that they'll pay me whatever I need, but we do our best to address those three issues right up front and more than once. So that, well, actually, we're continually addressing those so that we minimize the chance for surprises. Any other?
I've got a couple sort of tangible and immediate, I think, do we participate as a committee or members of the committee in the site visit, or you do that all within your team?
We like your participation. In fact, we would like to meet with you guys at the end of that meeting, kind of like an exit interview. One, for several reasons. One, we may learn things during that site visit that we didn't want to come back and ask you about. Plus, we want your input, just like we're asking the stakeholders. I sent a draft of questions to Ernie and Jamie about the types of questions we asked. The survey is a much simpler version of that, but we're going to ask you guys the same thing. Also, so let's suppose that you have a faculty forum for input. Having you guys, one or more of you sit in so you can hear the same thing, that's fine. Where we would maybe prefer to kind of be on our own is we like to meet with the cabinet. You refer to it as the superintendent's cabinet, the direct report of the institute planning or something. We kind of prefer to meet with them, not individually. We want to meet with them as a group, but maybe without members of the committee, because we want them to be really open and candid with us. We also want to see how they interact with each other. Those candidates will ask us, tell us about the leadership team before they inherit. We can say, hey, we had lunch with them or we met with them. We have a sense of that. But by and large, we want your participation, but particularly that meeting at the end is vital.
The second one is tenure. What are we proposing as a desired tenure? Will that involve?
I don't think we've gotten that far yet, but I think that's something we can talk about.
The third is more difficult, I think. We are in a very politically charged environment. Internal VMI politics here on coast, external alumni, within the state legislature, political thing writ large. How do you negotiate those kinds of concerns, and do you take those into consideration at all in the process?
Boy, that's a loaded question.
No, it's not loaded. No, it's really not. I'm sincerely interested, I've been in many situations that had significant political consequences. But, you know, how you respond to that is sometimes a challenge.
So I think there's several answers to that. One, and these aren't necessarily in the right order, but or in any particular order. One is we're very honest with candidates, right? Because we're going to ask you some questions to give us some insight into some of that beyond what we can read. And we want to make sure that we all have the same honest, objective story that we're telling the candidates. So we're honest. We're honest and upfront. Here's the deal. And because they're going to read it. The other thing we try to do is I try to read anything I can. I don't want a candidate reading something that I haven't read, so I know what they're going to find. Now, obviously, when there's so much information, we can't get it all, but try to read a fair amount so that we are informed from you and what we've read on what they're going to hear and see, so we can deal with it. Thirdly, we try to communicate very closely with the search committee chairs if we've got any issues. Our team conducted the president search for the North Carolina Community College system. We had a Senate. There were different political bodies that wanted different candidates, and we also had a lead. The way that we dealt with that is we had co-chairs of the committee, and we communicated with each other almost every day about how do we handle this, how are we making sure that we're above reproach, and making sure we deliver the right message. So we communicate, we're honest, we try to inform ourselves, and when in doubt, go to the co-chairs and say, how do we handle this? Because sometimes you don't know what you're going to deal with. It may pop up all of a sudden, might be something different.
So we mentioned this the first time, but I think what Ernie and I want is we want to be as open and transparent on absolutely everything, unless there's a prohibition on why it's I can't even envision what it is, but just because there are so many concerns. I think you probably already understand, many people believe somebody's already been chosen, which, nothing to do about it. So I just think, and in every aspect that we need to be open and honest and to use an open, very transparent.
Along similar lines, I think we all received a letter from an individual who had some opinions on how the process ought to work. What we probably like to get folks, flags and off this process. What's your advice on how we as committee members respond and we put up the confidentiality shield and say, I'm sorry, it's just, we really can't talk about anything related to this? We respond, what do we do when we're approached and like this broad approach we just got? And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
No, I'm not. I want to pass the buck on this, but I really think the response is you send people to your co-chairs. Because I think you need to have single points, dual points of contact here. Because we're not spokespeople for that. I think collectively as a group, depending on your leadership here, and funnel any type of comment. You can thank people and then funnel it to the co-chair.
That's more efficient on your institutional or professional approach to that sort of thing. But obviously, that's committee.
Yeah, any approach to a search committee member where there's any doubt, I'd funnel to the chair. I do the same. Martin will do the same. Jamie will do the same. We've done some work in our county, Mecklenburg County, get approached by the press. We do not comment to the press. We send it to the search committee chairs. The one thing that we will need to know, and this is a little bit tangential to what you said, is candidates are going to have an expectation of confidentiality. We need to be able to tell them right up front, if you get to X point, then your name may be made public. Obviously, if somebody visits posts, whether there's an announcement made or not, that becomes public. But if there's going to, at any point, if there's going to be a public announcement of their candidacy, we need to let them know that well in advance so that they can know that. Which is a little different from what you're asking, right? I just had that thought following 15 minutes. Either you want to chime in on the approach by people from the outside?
No, I wanted to follow up on the question around the landscape within the Commonwealth. And, higher education is at a very interesting time right now, but we're currently conducting searches at Radford, University of Mary Washington, William and Mary, and Christopher Newport. So, we have other experiences that have informed our knowledge of the political landscape across the Commonwealth, as well as public higher education. So just wanted to provide that our knowledge and understanding of what is going on within Virginia has been informed well beyond, just what we will learn from you all. I think that's important.
You will get questions about all kinds of things. At least that's our experience, that search committee members are going to get questions, and particularly one that's this high profile, where you already had some people approach you. That's going to happen. It's going to happen.
No, sorry, I was thinking about that on the way up. And I kind of almost, first kick it back to the, speak in one voice, rather than our individual opinion. And I almost even wanted to go even further back to the board and done out of maybe not on an individual correspondence basis. If you want to thank people for comments or whatever we got from. I'm going to ensure it's their responsibility to communicate to everyone that's approached, and then maybe that should come from the board, since this is the job of the administrators to hire superintendent and speak in one voice as one voice that way. That was kind of my fault.
I think with this one, probably the initial suggestion that Jamie and I coordinate a response for one is required, maybe we're better because we're so engaged in the process, and this is great. It's not going to go. But I think the question I don't really answer in my own mind is from getting the impressive queries. What's the best way for handling that? And I think that's when Jamie and I take back and think through before you actually receive one, to have a sense for what's our response and how to be. So we don't work flat footed questions.
So kind of the two answers, you haven't seen this, but an individual wrote to all of us that said we really should appoint an interim right now based on the complexity and the time it's gonna take and enumerate all the reasons why that should all go down. And I read it and said, you know, okay, not sure, not to respond to it, but I don't respond to it necessarily. You know. But that's not,
you know, it's interesting, on the very first meeting, we said, you know, I think one of the things we need to make sure is that all the constituencies that care, that have a stake in this, that not only do we listen to them, but we let them know that we value their opinion. And then the first thing that comes down to it, you know, all we're gonna ask. When I do that, Ernie and I talk about that, I think that it's a balance, but I kind of think that, you know, towns being what they are, if we can answer.
It's a simple answer. Thanks for your input. And we have, you know, we've got a search committee and we thank you for your input. And we appreciate what you do for this. But, you know, just, I think a simple response, you know, not, you know. Yeah, don't, because then you'll be coming back. With
Less is always better.
Right.
Less is more about.
It's gonna be valuable.
Yeah.
That's when you got the speaking and all that, so it is, so I do appreciate it, but I don't think we need to.
But back to what we said, it say, would be transparent, everybody wants to know, so at least you respond to this individual. You know, and say, okay, we respond.
And these comments, that's an excellent segue to the value of the site visit and what our certainly our institute here in Lexington, we want to have a supportive role in process. And the survey is able to reach other members of our institute community who are not in Lexington. So I don't want to foreclose any other questions that are panel, but that conversation we're just now having is exactly why they need to get the feedback for the site visit. So unless there are other questions right now, maybe we can dive into that.
Okay. Actually, I do wonder, so the survey that you're mentioning, to whom does that go? I mean, how broadly is that sent?
Anybody you want to send.
Really? So that may accomplish the same sort of feedback loop without individual response.
But yeah, that survey can be distributed as broadly as want it to go, alums, community members, students. In fact, the first question on that survey is how do you identify what is your relationship with BMI? And it's everything from board member to student to friends, like community member. And it's pretty simple. It's open-ended questions, so they can write as much as they want. I don't know, something we've started doing now when we do the surveys. I can't remember if I mentioned this to you guys, but we just did one for a school in Missouri. 159 responses. It was kind of low, but we took it and embedded into Notebook LM, which is closed in AI, get it summarized, and it gave us a really good summary. Summarized about 60 pages of data into about 2 or 3 page synthesis. Because what we're looking for are common themes where people are passionate about, and so we would do. I would propose that we do the same thing here. You can see the raw data. I think a committee can have the raw data, obviously. But if we can get that synthesis, then that helps us give us target what people are saying. And in an ideal world, we could get that done before we come to campus, and we have that before we come to post. So I'm gonna catch that. I'm getting it. If we have that data before we come to post for a visit, then that can help inform or help us probe a little bit on some of the areas that, especially if there were areas that were kind of outlines that we didn't expect to see. But
How do you get it out?
Most of our clients send it out themselves, so they have mailing lists. We just give you the link. But you've got a mailing list of all your loans.
Right, yeah, okay, so I mean, if we want to send it out to all
You
along.
can also put the link on the web page for the search and direct people to that. So anybody that goes to that web page, the president of the superintendent search web page. Will you help us with that?
Why don't we have Bill White take the lead on that? And then you can help us on the alumni side. And I won't go on the tangent, but the different groups get, now you know what the survey is, but I think this one is unique. Very, very helpful, and probably the sort of make sure it's posted as a link. Every URL can only send it once, but
Faculty and cadets too.
I think it should be both.
That's good.
And not just faculty, but I would say, all of uniform staff, equal classified, A and B teaching. I mean, both teaching faculty, the administrative and professional, uniform people, and then classroom. So just all three groups of them.
But, just, there are full-time salon.
Yeah.
So I want them to still
Yeah, the
be.
uniform really has nothing to do with faculty, teaching faculty, administrative and professional faculty, and classroom.
And I'm also sure you're regularly sending out information through your alums, so that's a pretty easy thing to do. The more response that you can see from that, brings just more information to look for consistency of how fine. So for the site visit, which is the personalized version of that survey, what the survey does is help you reach a lot of people who aren't on posts, who can't get the posts, who aren't here as part of their work. It gives them a chance to give the input, but the personalized version is to actually come on site where you can not only listen, but you can see, smell, taste, speak or feel. What we had talked about was possibly the 21st and the 22nd of April for that visit. That's a Monday, Tuesday, it's a Monday after Easter. The reason that we had talked about that date is we were trying to get it in before post starts to clear out or before you get into graduation activities. We kind of compared schedules and we had the 21st, 22nd as a backup, maybe 24th and 25th. But what we were thinking is that if we could start sometime in the afternoon of the 21st, that would give and for the search committee, if none of you were involved, somebody that have to travel long distances, if you aren't involved in the first part and think that we would meet with you last, but you're really not involved substantially for that meeting until the afternoon of the 22nd. Typically, the things that we like to do when we come on post is there are various stakeholder groups that we like to meet with. One would be the leadership team. If there's a faculty leadership group, if there's a student leadership group, if there's a staff leadership group. Some clients choose to do open forums rather than confining it to a leadership group. One that we just did had an open forum for faculty. Sometimes we go on and get the faculty senate. We'll have just make it a faculty senate or staff leadership council. But it's a mix of faculty, staff, all levels of administration. We generally like to meet with students. Often it's student leaders, how we characterize as student leaders. Obviously the search committees in that group as well. We can add on anybody else. I've met with chambers of commerce, I've met with mayors. We as a team have met with all types of community groups. So we can be as broad as you would like, but if we start one afternoon and go through the next afternoon, roughly 24-hour period, we can meet with all the stakeholder groups. If it's a really big group, probably an hour and a half. If it's a group like the leadership team, probably about an hour per. The search committee meeting probably needs be about 2 hours. Although we've covered a lot here that we would normally cover in that meeting, but we can allocate 2 hours. What have I missed?
If we put the meat on the bones of this thing, is it possible to share it with the whole group? But like off the top of my head, just talking about before we met, for cadet leaders, you could have the regimental commander and a couple of cadet captains to represent the military. You could have the first class president. I mean, you've got the president, vice president, and historian. You can argue if we need to go down to the third class, but at least the second class and the first class. I think we should have some team captains from the NCAA that is on our athletic side. I asked Bill if within those groups we don't have a handful of first class privates represented. I think they're an important demographic. Say again. Yeah, the OGA. Sort of that. So we'll work that between Bill, Ernie, the team, and I. We'll also share the views of the input. I would recommend that they talk to the academic board, but we probably need to have another meeting where they can talk to members of the faculty that are department head, so we can work in the teams on that.
I know you're not,
Well, I will not. I mentioned that earlier that I did just.
I think that.
And if it happens to be a group that can't be on post that day, we can do virtual be either while we're here or later. But from our standpoint, basically, as long as we know what time to show up and what building to be in, and you have defined the groups, given the input that we just gave you and anything, anybody else that you want to add, and when we end, that's what we need to know. When do we need to show up and where do we need to be? We would also like a tour, by the way. We also tend to like to and
That's all.
That's all. I started to say that. We like to eat the best.
We can send that over.
With the students.
We'll do it. That's already.
Yeah, because you can sometimes get a good feel for being around.
Absolutely.
The mess hall university. Always has been.
So I'll tell you that we've had some really good food in dining halls on college campus.
It ain't gonna happen there.
Well, it didn't happen when I was in school.
It's pretty good.
Oh, I bet you have pizza.
So we've got two-day blocks in the same week. One's the Monday, Tuesday, one's the Thursday, Friday. And not to slice the point too fine, but 2 days of business day gives us more time to get some survey information out. But I sense y'all prefer to do the 21st, 22nd, vice the 24th, 25th. Are there any, are there really, I guess the question I've got is, what are the major considerations in your mind? And I want to make sure, given that the Sunday beforehand is Easter, that people need to travel, like myself from that state, getting people here in time to be productive for you, got the right representation of search committee members in these other meetings. And so pick the 1 2 day block versus the other, got all the right factors in mind.
We basically chose 21, 22, I think, based on looking at our schedules, the dates that we talked about. And if something were to happen, then we had to back up that one. Because if we go with 24, 25, then the backup is nice.
It's also the reunion weekend, so you may get more input than you want.
On 24, 25.
Yeah,
On 24, 25.
I mean, I'm just gonna, why not Tuesday, Wednesday?
We stayed away from Wednesday because Mark was, we want all three to be here and Mark's got a commitment that he can't change on the 23rd. That's the only. Okay.
There's ad board and department head. Close that out.
So that would not be a good day here or anything like that.
I'm sorry, which day?
23rd.
Yeah.
I think when we have the sequence of events for the on-site, is that what we call it? Site by site, we can determine which members of the committee want oversight or not oversight, but want to attend the different engagements. We can run that to make sure that it makes common sense, and then we won't need everybody in the committee until the 22nd.
That's correct.
That's so then, if anybody's pressed on the 21st, then we can go along with it.
That's fine.
The other option we have with all three of us being here, depending on how your scheduling goes and how many groups, we can divide and conquer. We don't all have three have to be together at the same time, so we can divide and conquer if that helps with scheduling.
I want any committee member that wants to participate in one of these meetings, but we really recommend this thing there, have the wherewithal to do that.
Probably the only one that it really helps that not have a committee member in this when we meet with the academy, but we want them, that's what, anybody in this room?
Okay, so then I'll just throw it out for our committee. Is there any concern with either of those two-day blocks?
We have departmental event the 22nd for the evening, but
We'd be done. We should be done.
So what, 22nd, so for business meetings, just more than 2 board members show up in the same place to board. committee.
Does that just pertain to U of V members?
UOB members, that's
But that, so like Boyd and, Doc and I and Jack.
Yep.
And that's okay, that's not considered.
But if this thing on the 22nd is, we have more. And 3 members of the board here for that meeting, then it's a board meeting, so. Right.
Would you have any concerns about, as we are right now, hoping the public? I think it's just a matter of organizing. And provide proper notice to the full committee, the director, on the board members. That hot watch section.
So anything we're gonna discuss is gonna be, things that have been discussed on the site visit anyway. The only place I can see that could be an issue is, let's say you want to do a faculty forum, 3 of the board members are gonna show up at that faculty forum. Right, and that would talk about the board meeting.
Yes, it would, but we can manage that, I think, so. I'm proud of that.
With the faculty, would you envision form for them? Like, or would everyone?
That's really up to you.
Okay.
That's up to you guys.
We can certainly talk about it or do whatever, but my recommendation is that that needs to be the academic board, and there probably needs to be one of any member of the faculty.
And I would suggest several options for that because the class schedule, the only sort of free times that we have are 8 AM or 4 PM, and there's sometimes some pushback on that. And so if you have one open to the faculty, you might want to choose a time on the Monday and the Tuesday and possibly virtually Wednesday, just to have enough options to get as many faculty input as well.
I think our only limitation is making sure we get the fine blocks, but right, we can do it by time.
And really, that's why we don't try to plan that schedule, because we don't know the constraints on posts. We just say, here are the groups we'd like to meet with, you guys add others to it, and then as long as we know where to be, what time, we're good.
So one question about the survey and about this visit, what about us if we have different stakeholder positions? You know, like for example, me as a faculty member, when and where would I express my that survey on the site, as part of the committee?
So I think there's several ways. One, the survey, obviously, I think the survey's open to anybody. I think
all do the survey, see.
if anybody wants to, yes. But then I think when we have that last search committee meeting, we're going to ask you the search committee meeting into the site visit, where we ask you kind of the same questions. We definitely want to hear from them. And I would assume your colleagues would want to hear as well. Those are probably the 2 best forums.
So I think I heard through silence that there's really not a lot of concern with either the 2-day clocks, and then we've got the big scheme in second. But I'm also sensitive to, I'll make it up, we had a snowstorm on Easter. I live in Massachusetts, that actually happened. That if we needed to push it a couple days, you've got time to do it. So let's go ahead and set it for the 21st and 22nd, and then we've got 24th and 25th as a call.
Okay. And I think you guys have enough information about getting the groups to start working on the schedule. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think the answer is yes, and we would owe that back to you as well as the logistics of where we set the meetings up and who would likely be the invitees for certain groups that aren't open forums.
But we are, did you say the majority of the committee only needs to be on the 22nd, right?
Right.
Okay. Well,
Let me just, I think the message from Ken and team is they would like search committee members involved in all of these sessions to be listening as well. Obviously, we've got the board rules, we've got it. They're clear of, so we don't inadvertently create a board meeting or a census session. But apart from that, it's really about getting that engagement where we're doing the listening and the next particular group is providing their feedback. And so I think it's going to be incumbent on Jamie to get social preferences for that, and then make sure that you can put anything so that people know where to be and when to be. If there's some reason, for example, you get hung up on something on Monday and you can't make it down till Tuesday, and you've got that.
I just, my other thing is Easter Sunday, I got something, I come on Monday morning, that's fine.
We won't launch this until like lunchtime, 1 p.m.
Oh, okay, that's-
day one, or whichever day you pick, so.
We didn't want people to have travel on Easter Sunday. Anyway,
That's
so,
fine.
you know, we could start at 2, you know, that 24-hour period from whatever, 2 to 5 the next day, 27 hours, whatever. We'll have.
So, I just, on the, so the evening, on Monday evening, let's say, do you all just caucus together, or can you get get the committee together maybe for dinner or something like that?
That would be, meal times are a great time,
Just hash
but I don't know if all of you can get your.
No, I'm not saying
Yeah.
to everybody, the people who are here.
You know, the last site visit that I was involved in, we got there that night, and our first meeting was a dinner with the captain. So, we just started right in with the dinner with the captain. So, yeah, meal times are great. You know, meal time with students is often good as well.
We could also, sorry, I apologize. We could also start with a tour, so that would even, you wouldn't even need to be in there that soon, if that makes sense. So there are things that we could be seeing and doing that don't necessarily involve the committee.
And that's probably the one place that we would not divide and conquer, we'd all three want to take it.
Yeah.
But other than that, we can, because I have a feeling when you start adding some of these groups, you're gonna have a lot of groups, or if you do multiples, that we probably will have to divide and conquer some of that. That's perfect. And then we won't divide and conquer when we come back together with you for our exit meeting, so to speak.
So we're agreed on the 21st and 22nd, and Jamie and I working with Bill, we work with all of you all to get a schedule set up, make sure we're touching all the bases that we want to have with feedback and provide that guidance in more structure.
And just for those of you that haven't seen the survey, I'm gonna give you a high level overview of what the questions are, and then we usually go a little more in depth in the personal version. But the first question is, how do you identify yourself in relationship to VMI? The second one, and I'm paraphrasing here, what are the greatest opportunities at VMI? What are the most pressing challenges? Third question. What are the most immediate priorities the next superintendent needs to pay attention to? Fifth question, what are the attributes, experiences, and qualifications you would like to see in the next leader? Number 6, essentially, what else do we need to know? And then the last one is, do you have any referrals, nominations, or recommendations, someone that you think we should reach out to? And they're all open-ended except the first one, we're gonna have to check a box. So they can write 2 words or 2 paragraphs. But that's essentially the type of information we're asking. And I mentioned a dinner table conversation in those first round interviews. When we're sitting with these groups on the site visit, we also, what we try to get them talking. We kind of throw out open-ended questions, and then we want them to talk to us so that we can actively listen, and then we can probe based on what they tell us. We don't want to assume what they're going to tell us. We don't want to ask leading questions. We want to ask those big picture questions and get them to talk to us. Because it's amazing what I've learned in my time interviewing people. It's amazing what people tell you. And Howard, you may want to make some tweaks to that survey, but it's really pretty easy to get out. And if you like it the way it is, then the link's ready to go and send it out. I would say if we're knowing that Easter or Good Friday's on the 18th, we're looking at the 21st. Today is the 7th. I would probably have that, if at all possible. What's the Monday? The 14th.
Can we go back to just the distribution? And I know you all talked about it for quite a bit. I just was having a little hard time hearing some of it. It's going out under VMI branding, right? It's not being separately distributed.
Yes, it would be sent out. We have on the surveys the VMI logo, and then it would be sent from VMI.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, that's excellent. I've had multiple experiences where institutions have an outside vendor send a survey, but no one knows if it's legitimate or not, because it hasn't had the, either board president or somebody who said, you're going to get this and it is legitimate, but sounds like the branding should take care of that.
We hope so, yes. I would say maybe close the survey on the 14th or 15th. Maybe the 16th, depending on when you get it out. But it probably needs to be out there for about 5 to 7 days. And we can close it on midnight or whatever day you want to close, because we'll get the results, within a day. And it takes just a little bit to get them through. I just need to get them done before the 8th. I need to have it submitted and get the results back no later than close of business on the 7th. So it's Good Friday.
10/17. That's basically a full calendar. So that would be Wednesday. So 9/16.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that'll work.
We're gonna be.
It's not up there, it's they can take the weekend, it's been, okay, through that.
But you'll put that end date on the survey. It must be complete by, it'll be closed.
Actually,
They
it'll-
understand the urgency of it.
Yeah, and it'll cut off. They won't be able to answer it after, but yeah. And that was 8 through 16. Is that what you just said? No,
I think it's 5.
9 through 16.
So Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay. So then I think if we go to the next to last agenda item is kind of the tentative timeline. Are we ready to move there?
Before we do, are there any other questions on the site visit process? It's been described, either groups to be consulted or timeline or anything like that? All right, yeah, I think we will. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Kate, did you have something? Okay, then let's go ahead on to the timeline.
Okay. Martin, you and I briefly talked about this. You want to take this part?
I'm happy to, or you can run with it if you want, Ken. Either way.
We're a 3-person team, and we also have people who will support us in Nashville. But because I'm here, I'm probably dominating a little more. I apologize for that. It's just a little easier since I'm sitting here. Really, the first part of the timeline was the site visit. Then we'll turn around the profile. We finished the site visit on the 22nd. We think this 22nd. We'll try to turn around the profile by 28 or 29 for you guys to approve. And we talked about 48, 70.
We'll send that to everybody. We would like to turn it relatively quickly, and day would be ideal. I would ask no more than 3. The quicker we get it done, the better, but we don't want anybody to not have enough time. But
It's just a nay or yay or comment.
it's
Yes.
day or night or time.
And just to put things in context, so we get it 28, 29 April. Bear in mind, all the board members will be back here 1, 2, 3 May for our spring board. So if you can get that piece tied up from, it would certainly leach from the board members' comments before the board, that would be ideal. So.
And typically, what we're going to do in a profile is it's going to be, there's no way you can capture everything, right? We're going to try to write a book. Right. What we want to do is produce a piece that when people look at it, when they get it from us and they glance at it, they want to know more. So they want to engage with us so we get a chance to start talking to them. Much like a resume. So somebody's resume, their goal is not necessarily to get a job, it's want somebody engaged, they're intrigued. Same with these profiles. So typically what we'll write is a bit about the institution, and may or may not necessarily be this order. A bit about the institution, a bit about the location, a bit about the opportunity, a bit about the responsibilities and then the qualifications and how to get in touch with us and how to apply. It's kind of that order or that grouping of information. We do try to make it a bit visually pleasing, so include some pictures. Bill's already sent us some link to the bank of pictures that we can use. Again, we want somebody to look at that and say, wow, that kind of pops. And then they want to talk to us based on what they see and then the text. So when we send it back to you, a lot of what you're going to see is information that we've been able to get about the institution from publicly available sources. This is one place I think plagiarism is okay. We're basically don't want to recreate the wheel, and if there's material out there, whether it's something written in your strategic plan or on the website, we can use that. We may make it fit. So, but some of it may sound familiar. Also been doing this long enough to know that some information that we pull from public sources and yes, even websites is out of date. So you do need to read it and make sure that it's accurate. And it's also then we kind of compile when we get to the responsibilities and experience portion and the qualification portion. We incorporate a lot of what we hear from the listing session. A certain amount of it is going to sound similar if you read a president's position, a chancellor's position, and a superintendent's position. There are certain duties that are going to be the same, so some of it's going to sound familiar. But it's not like we're creating something that's never been created. What we want to keep in mind when we read it, making revisions, is this document is engaged, is designed to get people to see it, read it, want to talk, and represent this opportunity. Something that's going to go on our LinkedIn page, our website, your website. So it should not be a significant work on your part to have to change the law. Okay. All right, so then if that gets approved, then once that is approved, then we're off and running with phase 2 in our solicitation. So normally we think we need to be in the market 30 to 60 days for most searches to do, as Janie said, stir the pot, see what's happening and start to do our evaluation. Let's just take that as a hypothetical for a minute. That would put us through May, through June. So if we could target, let's split the difference and just say, and guys chip in, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. We could target sometime in the 45-day-ish range from the time the profile's approved to somewhere in that range. Think about having candidates to present.
As we are getting to the end of the academic year and academic year activities, that is a harder time to capture someone's attention. We can hope for the 45, but experience is.
It is aggressive considering it is the summer months, but if we target mid to late June to present. Yeah, that's.
I'm gonna go ahead and throw a marker and say an artificial deadline probably doesn't serve our interest.
I would agree with that, but.
Jamie, that's just me. What do you think?
I think we can aim for 45 days. I don't think that we need to write it down, but if we don't have enough candidates, we need more time. We can do an audible and visual time.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll have a better feel 30 days in.
We'll know sooner than that.
Yeah.
And then I think it really comes back to for lack of a better word, the demographics of the different kind of candidates. Some candidates won't be tied to this as much as other ones are, but we don't want to exclude anybody due to time.
That's a very valid point. Very valid.
Okay.
Yeah. But at least that kind of gives us a tentative aiming point, if you will. And like Janie said, we'll know easily with the 30 days, I think, what we're sitting. But if you think about too, relative to the VMI calendar, that 1st of May, the couple of weeks that we're gonna try to be sourcing people, and some of the people we're gonna be sourcing are also involved in graduation, so we're not gonna be high on the priority list. So really 30 days, 45 days is really 45 minus 14, really. So that does make it tight when you start looking at August 1.
So it sounds like probably around Memorial Day, first week of June. You're, to Jamie's point, that's when we're figuring out how it looks and we need
Problem.
the full 60-day line.
Problem, yeah. And I said this to you guys, I said it to the committee. When I think of a search, I think of it as a math problem. It's a 3-variable equation. The variables are how many candidates, how long does it take, and the quality of candidates. In my mind, one of those variables can't be moved. The other two can be adjusted. The quality is the one that can be moved. Right? Because that's what we live with. It's the other two we can adjust. Now, having said that, if we come out of the gate, all of a sudden we get flooded, and in 30 days, we've got a really good group of candidates. You don't know about it in 30 days, right? So, to elaborate on Janie's point, the specifics for each candidate, you know, for somebody who's in a contractual situation, they may be contractually obligated for a certain period of time. They may have a notice requirement, 30, 60, 90 days. But that's when I said we try to do the Paul Harvey rest of the story, that's the kind of thing we find out. So that we can tell you when you are considering them that, hey, if this is a person you're going to pursue, you need to know about this limitation. So that then you can use that to factor into your decision process. But we do know from our meeting, earlier meeting, that ideally we would have someone August 1st. And we'll do everything we can to facilitate towards that goal without sacrificing quality.
Okay. So if we are locking in the first consideration of candidates based on Memorial Day, first week of June time, that's sort of an interim status check, and we know whether we're going to be talking about mid-June or later in the summer, say early July, then that's going to necessarily dictate what the timing is for moving to semifinal interviews and then final on-post interviews. And so while this is a bit like predicting weather, what's typically the turnaround time we all see that from the identification of candidates to the semifinal interview, how much turnaround time is that? And then evaluation of those and moving to the final candidates on the post. What's the turnaround time on that?
So from the meeting where you decide who you want to, we present candidates, and you decide who you're inviting to the first round interviews, depending on your schedules, because often that is the biggest factor in the timing and where you want to do them. You could, and depending on how many people, obviously it's easier if you're interviewing 8 than if you're interviewing 12, right? You can probably turn that around in a couple of weeks. Couple of weeks, kind of aggressive, but it can be done. Because you're asking people, and a lot of it too depends on where the candidates are coming from. You know, if you're doing them at an airport and you've got half the candidate pool that can drive in, that's pretty easy. If you're flying everybody in, well, if you've got a good airport where there's, you can probably do it within 2 weeks. From the meeting, the last meeting of that first round interviews where you do your debrief and decide on your finalists, that generally takes a little more because you've got to plan for the post visit. You're probably looking at 2 to 3 weeks. The logistics of those 2 things are some of the toughest parts of the search. It has nothing to do with finding the right candidate. It has everything to do with getting information you need. It's just logistics. Because if they have jobs, they're out doing things. You guys are all busy. That's another thing you will have to talk about as a committee is that what if first round interviews, let me just pick a number, if you had 8 and one of you can be there, or maybe one of you can only be there one of the days, are you going to go with less than a full committee? or you're gonna allow somebody to virtual in, which means you gotta pick a place that's got that option. Those are all just logistical things that can be solved, but they're things you have to. Another thing I'll mention is going forward to the site visit, thinking what role you guys play on a site visit. Site visit, I think, there are lots of ways you guys can integrate yourselves into those. You know, if people, somebody flies in, really easy to have somebody pick them up and drive them. Time in the car is great, depending on where they fly into. If they're moving from one place on campus to another, one of you guys can be the escort. Great time to get people let their hair down, talk about, them talking. So there, the other thing you'll have to think about is what is the interaction with the board of visitors as a whole? How do you want to do that? I think we're believing if you don't want the board to redo everything you guys do as a committee, but there are ways that you can integrate the board of visitors in a way that does not have them redo all the work that you've done, and you have preponderance of board visitor meetings on this, members on this committee to take care of it. So those are all things to think about that take a little time, and particularly if you're going to integrate the whole board of visitors, whether it's meet and greet or whatever, that's another scheduling issue, because now you've got all the board of visitors meetings, got all the board of visitor members that would need to be here or whatever it is. But those are all logistical things. But think about it.
That's notification time for a board meeting.
3 days.
3 days.
If you're not inclined to let the board of visitors do a full-blown interview, since you guys are really representing them, one of the things we recommend is often meet and greet. You can have a drop in, so that means board members that want to come can, what that does for your board. Notice, and you probably would have to notice that. Then you can always have a dinner with the executive of the board, or just we got. I mean, there are as many options as you can be creative about.
Okay. 2 members of the executive committee are also on this one.
So you're right.
Questions on timeline? Either in the room or on the phone? Okay. Questions on, since Ken mentioned just now, and he answered an earlier question I had about when do we solidify the role of the committee versus the board, etc. in the offsite interviews. I think the answer would be got some time to work on that, but as long as we're on that topic, any questions or points and developments raising that on that floor.
Well, who makes the final decision? The board? The board votes on it, is majority vote.
That must do the board and only the board would choose to pursue.
I mean, hypothetically, 2 candidates, 3 candidates, what do you think?
Well, that's the question. Are we making a recommendation of one? Or has the whole board had opportunity to, that's what I'm saying, solidifying that last step. It's not in my own mind, right? And that's something we've got a little bit of time to sort out, but I do think that's something that, as we progress in this process, we want to have locked in.
Has the board given you a written charge?
No.
That might be something you want to ask for, but they could clarify, the board could clarify that for you.
One recommendation. Every time period is different circumstances.
Given we'll have one community. So asking that everybody's going to agree on it, right?
That'd be great. Everybody.
Since you have a preponderance of board members on this committee, it would be, in my opinion, it would be easier if you were asked to give a recommendation. But that's really up to the board.
We do need to work it out, come back to it.
What about the kind of position where you need an intern? Is that something that this committee, that the firm, is that something that can come out of this, or?
I haven't talked to the board president or anything, I probably should, so I might be speaking a little bit out of turn, but if it were me, if we think we're gonna have someone selected sometime between the last day of June and, August or even September, And my recommendation would be that either the deputy, either the dean or general clerk be an acting superintendent until we get the next consideration. I think an interim would be longer. I would prefer not to have an interim. If we're talking 4 to 6 to 8 to 12 weeks, then I think acting superintendent should have whatever.
James right, we've not flushed that out. We should probably take that about. Good sense to it.
Did you have the candidate that can't start for 3 months or something, you know, their current job?
Yes. Should we tell them if this is going to be an open search, like closed search or something?
Yeah, I guess we should, because I've got what maybe in my own mind, just look at how it is for everybody. So once we're ready, I was going to let you say. All right, so I'll tell you. In looking at some of the documents from what the search committee did in the last time around, the structure, as much as we discussed, where the search firm gathered a pool, there were what I characterize as semi-final interviews at an offsite location, and all of that was confidential. Not the process was confidential, but obviously the names and so forth were confidential, if not public meeting. And then when the finalists, we reached a finalist list, and again, it's conceptually 4 plus or minus. Those names would be public, and obviously the on-post visit would be public. Now, 2 other members on this search committee were on the last search committee, and obviously 2020 was far different, and 2021 is a far different environment than where we are now, and so some of the logistics are a lot different. But in general terms, that was the approach that in my own mind, I thought we would pursue this time. And so I think the real question is, are there reasons, and Jane, if I'm making this question too narrow, stop me, but are there reasons why we would want to make that final round confidential? And that could be really hard to do if the reasons depends on your outline, but let's slow down the table and make sure that there's no concerns that we're overlooking that prospect. Is that fair summary? Okay. I personally don't think we should. I personally don't either, but I also don't know that you can.
There have been other schools that have done things like published on their websites, really defined for thing. I don't think that is. Just
For the confidentiality of it. I mean,
That's really the concern.
Yeah.
Someone's in a position.
When they're in a job and they don't,
Right.
they don't want their boss to know this.
Yeah.
I see this happen every, weekly, don't,
But what I will say, and we've got a little bit of a dog in that, in this last race, was A&M publicly announced to their 4 finalists found on, and obviously one of my classmate, he wound up getting a job. So there is another model out there where it is more publicized, I guess is about word, than what we talked about. But if the committee's comfortable not keeping it a secret, but not publicizing it, I think James and I are comfortable with that approach as well.
I think it makes part of local transparency, so that kind of makes it.
yeah. I mean, as long as we get it, fine.
Yeah, so that's where I was gonna head back. I made a comment earlier, we need to let the candidates know as soon as possible when their name may be public. So under the scenario you just described, early on, we would tell the candidates, if you become a finalist, not only will you be going to campus, which there's an expectation that they'll be coming to post, and that's not confidential, but they are going to announce your name as a finalist in X form, and we have to tell them what form. And we like to tell candidates that right up front, so that they know. Because what we don't want is to get way down the line with somebody and I can't tell. You didn't tell me this, or I don't want my name to be public. And not only is it their boss that a lot of them worry about, it's their team. Because if they want to be the ones to tell their team. So from our standpoint, I think I understand the transparency. The longer you can keep it confidential, the better. We need to know when you're gonna make it and how you're gonna make it public so that we can inform. That's from our side.
Since these are technically field meetings, do we have to go to executive session? Because those are open public.
Closed session.
Closed session.
We have to have this.
So we get to that point, I discuss the closed section, and at the end of that, aren't we obligated then to publish the outcome of that closed section? We talk about the final matters and
Any, you can have straw poll during the closed session, but any action, any official action you want to take has to be done.
the official action is not necessarily carrying down the team, down the field. Is that an official action?
My experience is we can do that in closed session because you're discussing personnel matters. Now, I'm not an attorney.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the exception of the clause.
Yeah. Personnel matters. So then, once you get to the point, regardless of whether you announce who your finalists are or not and what form you announce them in. Again, it's my experience that once you come out of closed session, you vote on who the single finalist. There's only one name that ever.
But the build up simply say, we during this, we consider the following things and. Yeah, you don't have to put specifics of what you decide in terms of narrowing the figure, so. You say,
And there's a script talking about personnel matters and you just leave it at that.
Right, so you can keep it in closed session at the committee level and then have another closed session. Full board and then decide at that point what you want to do, if you want to announce the final three or part of it. As long as you do it within the confines of the closed session.
So we have a president search right now, just moved to the final stage, first candidates in today. It's happened to be a community college. They did not announce their finalists. The way they announced their finalists is to prepare the campus for the visit. They sent out an email and they originally published schedules. Candidate 1 will be here X day. Here's the schedule. Candidate 2, candidate 3. In this particular instance, they had to get approval from the state for the finalists. The minute they got approval, they sent out an email to the board, the campus community, and the foundation board and said, here's who candidate 1 is, here's who candidate 2 and candidate 3. So it's not going to show up on any Google or anything like that. That was the method they chose because in North Carolina, you do not have to make a public announcement. What I'm hearing you guys say is yes, you may do that, but before that, you would probably announce who the finalists were in some form.
I'm not sure I'm saying that. I think what we're saying is that there's a question of, is it public at all? I think the answer is yes. Is it publicized? And I think that's the question that we're trying to
I vote for the no.
I like that too.
I mean, it's gonna get out.
Like their stuff, at what point, they actually know their competition. And then the first person says no, and you end up with the third person, they know they were third. I mean, I just, you think about all of that.
That's all relevant. I think the model that I just described, the only way they find out who their competition is if people talk or that type of thing. Because again, it's not going to show up on a Google anywhere because it's not posted anywhere on a website. But if you like that model, that's a pretty easy one to do because you can plan ahead with the schedules and just add the candidates' names that you need to.
What is the benefit? It's like what they second set questions, but what is the benefit of putting there are 4 or 5 minutes? For the public.
Tells us who they are so that we can know who we want to call them.
Yeah.
I know your perspective, it helps your pool, but I mean, is there?
As an outsider reading, and I'm a layman on this, but if I were an Aggie grad of the Corps, I would be interested in who the 4 finalists were, just in the horse race fashion of, well, who's next time? It could be a Marine 3-star, it could be a retired Army colonel. If I know these people, that's great. If I don't know them, then I know they're being quality from outside of the graduate. Because not all of the finalists in the case were A&M grads. So as a former boss man, psychic income, I mean, I think that's kind of it. And it's not to say that that's not a valuable piece. So that if, for example, our alumni body, they saw who the 4 finalists were, and oh wow, these are 4 really good candidates, at least at first blush, they look like what I kind of thought we needed in the suit. That's great. I'm sure that won't be unanimous, but I think that's the value. Look how important we are because we're able to attract these people to come to College Station.
Laura, what did you do last time, remember?
Well, it was during the pandemic, it was all virtual. And, so it was much different. But when I remember, we kept it very confident. And we selected, one person, and I didn't feel like we had a big pool. But, yeah, it was all virtual and what they we didn't go out and really ask anyone. But again, whether it's
I mean, it sounds like very early, not in the next 2 weeks, but very early, you need to be able to tell anyone you're actually engaging with what the end possibility is at the very least. And so my concern, I actually think there are a lot of positives to being completely confidential. We're talking about ourselves being confidential. Rumors fly, references are made, information gets out there. Like, one concern I have is people are guessing and they're wrong, and a lot of energy is wasted in dealing with that, just within the community. And so the other concern I have is, I think we would have to be extreme if we were suggesting and we decided ultimately we want to keep it completely confidential until the very end. It's just the one person. I'm not sure we can do that. We as committee members can all agree that we're not going to let that out there, but I'm always mindful of when you create an expectation of confidentiality, what happens when it gets out through whatever mechanism that happens. And so it seems to me important to set an expectation where a public body that they have to expect at some point they are going to become public. And I understand we're debating when that point is, but I think it'd be very hard to keep it tight to the point that it's just one as opposed to 3 or 4. But I also would appreciate the experience of the folks that have run these searches before, of how attainable in a public university setting as opposed to a corporate GC, headhunter search, which I'm a little more familiar with, where they can keep it super tight. How much could you even, as an institution, expect to keep it completely confidential?
It really varies. It really varies by institution. I could sit here and probably give you multiple examples of how different institutions have done it. I mentioned a search that we did earlier for a community college system. They wanted to keep it confidential. We had a leak. And so it showed up in the press, right? That was just the way it is. I've had others where it has been pretty confidential, but those were private institutions. I think the big question is, it's going to get out is how official and how official, is there an official announcement from the institution? And if so, what does that take? Because there's probably some expectation that there's going to be some public knowledge. And like I said, from our standpoint, we just need to let candidates know early. It may cost a few people, in the candidate pool because of that. But for a public institution, probably not a significant amount.
Let me ask a question from a 180 perspective. This is advocating following the A&M model, and that is, if we were to make some sort of brief announcement that all 4 finalists are actually going to be attending, and will be invited to office from Y to Z dates. Under the rubric of being as open and transparent as we can possibly be, for many alumni who confuse transparency with not paying attention, if there is something like that gets the word out, then the first time they're hearing about it is when that announcement's made, and not when the board has selected the winner. And I guess what I'm saying is, if we are espousing transparency, then maybe we've got to be a little bit more upfront about, if you make a finalist, there will be a brief press announcement that your name will be released. And the whole point of that is for one of our intended audiences, which is our alumni base, which is somewhat fractured right now. And so they're being kept up to speed, and this is not some super secret thing. It's being done by a committee and by extension the board, even though it's not super secret. It's just we haven't made a big deal publicized. So you see the distinction in front of it, isn't it?
I think I do. Let me ask a follow-up question to that. And I'm not an attorney, I'm not a PR person either, but could you make that kind of announcement in an email to the same constituent group that you send a survey to, rather than posting their pictures on the website or issuing a press release? Because then you're getting it to your stakeholder group. It is transparent, but it's not that quite the A&M model.
I am comfortable with that. I mean,
It's just a thought.
for the purpose of the candidate, it really doesn't matter. Their names are going
Names
to
will
be
be out there.
What it's worth.
I am too.
A&M did it, Citadel did it last time they announced it. I can feel this. Just,
The group that I'm most concerned about is the disaffected alumni group, who, because something's not spoon-fed to them, you might think that we're hiding something. If the only time they see the final name, if there's something that's pushed to them.
See, that's what I was thinking in making that recommendation, because then you are contacting them, each of them personally. They don't even have to go to the website to hunt. You are proactively reaching out to them.
So, do we announce when they will do post? And the reason I say that is we don't want them to follow as they walk around the post. Maybe different.
That could be.
I think something you got to be very cognizant of, especially, in announcing something like that, is the media is going to be looking for any opportunity to do an article on this and pitch their view of it. So every step of the way here, I think it's very important that we take into consideration the exposure and the risk associated with media coverage.
I think that risk is going to exist once you notify, just if you notify the campus community, candidate one, and then you put a name of candidate one, and here's the schedule. We had one recently where, when that schedule was posted, one of the faculty members notified the local press. There's no way to. Really no way to
Well, that's just it. There's no way to keep that under a lid. So
but it is, you have to be aware of it.
I mean, to Terry's question, my own personal vote is we don't necessarily have to disclose the public. So,
Yep. Here's the 4 days.
Obviously, the folks on post are interested in knowing, because they're much like the census session. There's going to be some engagement between both, but
and whatever the people on post do with that notifications out of all of our control.
and from a candidate expectation perspective, if that's what they are expecting, is that their names will be announced to alumni, faculty, and staff, reach the final stage, then that's the expectation.
That's the expectation, and we can tell them that right up front.
Yeah, no, I agree with your sensitivity to the alumni base, but I'm thinking through like all the different scenarios that could happen. Say there's 4 people, and say there's a huge portion of the alum that really want this one person, and that's not the person that gets it or not the recommended. Then you automatically kind of have some, bad feelings towards that person coming in. So I don't know, I just worry that something like that could happen. Or what if you only have one candidate or 2, and then you.
That is always a possibility, and I think what you described is a very real reaction. But once they step on campus, even if there's no announcement, if there's no push out, once they step on campus and people know who's coming to campus, you still have that same risk. I don't think you can eliminate that. Now that does bring up a good point. And this is for fleshing out further down when you structure that campus visit. Our advice is make sure you don't set up a group to have to appear to have veto power because they really don't. So you don't want to structure some things that look like interviews when they're really not interviews, and in some aspects, maybe as much from the candidate's viewpoint as it is yours, which brings to mind something else I should have said in my general comment. Never underestimate how much you guys are selling. You're evaluating candidates, but you're also selling, and they're evaluating you every bit as much as you're evaluating. We have had candidates pull out after they meet with search teams. We had a candidate pull out of a business team search because one of the faculty members chased him to the parking lot to tell him why online education should not be a part of any of those programs. I mean, so they are evaluating you guys every bit as much as you're evaluating.
One other question about, is this ultimately a DOE decision though? I mean, not, obviously the candidate, but being, announced.
Maybe in the guidance that they receive, that we get from the commission. Right. That's a good point.
Other questions from the phone? Okay. What other questions or points do you want to bring up?
I think I've covered everything on the agenda. Have I missed anything, guys? Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so, Ken. No, that was really comprehensive.
I'm sorry, that's one question. The traffic survey, and from that, we're going to help profile and provide us. Surveys also provide input on what needs to change, what and all that. When is that going to be presented to us? Because I think that's something we as a committee need to be sensitive to. So when is that survey result presented to us for our consideration as a committee?
Excuse me. So if the survey closes on the 16th, sometime before we have our meeting on the 22nd, I'll probably get an email to you on the 21st, but I have to have that data here front. Well, we'll have the raw results, which we will send to you, and then we'll run it through the notebook LM and get the synthesis, and we'll send that to you, so you will have it before we meet on the 22nd as a meeting.
So we'll have two products, and one is a synthesis, the other is your recommended profile.
No, the profile won't come to after. The two products you'll have will be the raw data results from the survey.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, then the profile will be like 2020, right? Yes. So, but that way, when we sit down as a group on the 22nd, we will have everything we've heard on the 21st, 22nd, and all that survey. We'll all have the same thing.
Other questions? From anyone on the phone? Other questions? Okay, you want to have full close?
I'd just like to thank everybody. So it's wonderful that I think it was a really good first meeting with y'all. So thanks very much. And everyone on the committee, thank you. Thanks to our counselor and Bill. So that's all I can.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you all again very much. And it is almost 4 o'clock, so I think we nailed it. Thank y'all. We are adjourned.
Thank you. This is going to be fun. Enjoy working with you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Look forward to being there.